Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining the Virtual Healthcare Forum. My name is Drew Kerner. I'll go into a little bit more about my background in just a second here. We have an amazing agenda set for today and with a number of speakers, and I'll kind of set the framework here as we go through the process. Full notice, safe harbor, as anyone that's been to Knowledge, this is usually our second slide in anything. There will be a number of things that are shared from a roadmap perspective, as well as some other things that the customers are sharing that we don't want necessarily shared. This session will be recorded, and we will be sharing this out too. So feel free to share with your friends and colleagues other experiences as well too. We do have the cameras muted, so we don't get the fun background noises of the dogs and kids in the background. The way that we'll facilitate the chat though is in the Zoom chat. So feel free to ask any questions there. I will be asking those to the presenter just to keep things streamlined and going as process a little bit quicker. And then also, if you do want to choose to ask a question to the group, make sure you choose the selection there of all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see it. So we can have a little bit of a dialogue in the chat. We're just refraining from doing that within the video as well. So the agenda for today, so we're going to kick things off on the ServiceNow side with the healthcare roadmap and strategy, and then we're going to kick into the session around enabling mobility with the team at Stanford, a return to purpose to work, and then optimizing cost management, and then integrating with the Oracle from the HR standpoint with Josh at SCL, and then a couple closing remarks as well as some call to action on our side as well too. So definitely keep, we're going to try to do our best to stick to the agenda. I'll get to the questions as we can, but definitely as much as possible, we don't ideally want to go over. So we'll try to keep those pretty well streamlined as much as possible. And just to kick things off, myself here, Drew Kerner, I'm our healthcare CTO here at ServiceNow. Been here about 3.5 years. Hopefully know a lot of folks that are on the phone, but also worked at a hospital system here in Colorado previous to working at ServiceNow. So have that hands-on experience similar to a number of our speakers today, including Vishaka, who's going to tag team this first piece with us as well. So, and my primary responsibility now is to help with design our product roadmap from a partnership with Vishaka that we'll touch on first here, as well as talking to customers and facilitating ideas. So hopefully the next one of these will be in person. I know that these typically work a little bit better when we are in person. I was actually just on site at a customer meeting at a hospital yesterday for the first time in 1.5 years. So ideally the next one of these will all be back together in person, hopefully somewhere fun as well too. So, and again, this is meant to be a sharing of stories. So as you hear the stories today and what we're going through, and with Josh and Christine and David as well, they're doing some really cool things, and think about you participating and potentially being presenting in the next one, right? So it's a pretty light lift. There's some very cool stories we'll have here. So and share these with your friends and other people in your organization too. This is really the design of what we'll be going through as well. So let's jump into the first piece here. So I'm going to tag team this with Vishaka. A quick introduction for Vishaka. I'll let her further introduce herself, but she's paired up with me now as the Global Head of Solutions Director from the healthcare side. So we've had a lot change within ServiceNow within the last 1.5 years as well, which include not only hiring our boss, Mike Lucy, who's our healthcare general manager, but having a full-blown product team now. So we launched our EMR Help solution back in December. And what you'll see today is the roadmap for the Rome, as well as the San Diego release as well too. So Vishaka is also from a provider. She most recently came from Kaiser Permanente. Hopefully you guys all know Kaiser, but she was there for 11 years. I'll let her dig into her background as well too, but also spent some time at Baylor Scott and White and THR down in Dallas as well too. So very happy to have her on board, and I'm going to kick off the first piece of this. And Vishaka, if you want to share out and do a quick introduction, and I'll jump into the first piece too.
Perfect. Thank you, Drew, for that introduction. So yeah, as Drew said, my My background is really in healthcare information technology, always been on the side of digital transformation and leading various initiatives across the provider space and the payer space. Happy to be at ServiceNow and really think about where the industry is going and figure out what solutions and which areas of the provider side that we can potentially add value to, enable more efficiencies, and really just help all of us work better together. So, with that, happy to be here, and I will, advance slides for you, Drew.
Sounds good. So one thing I think that's interesting now, and you'll see this as we start to go through the product line, is we're starting to expand our scope. So obviously, historically, we've called ourselves that main system of record for IT, and since I started 3.5 years ago, we've really been pushing to expand some of our options and capabilities, particularly on the clinical side. So now with the upcoming data model that's coming in, actually in a couple of weeks here, the data model will be released, and then the further consequent releases in Rome and San Diego. We're going to be giving you guys the ability to build some of these things out to start to extend into some of these experiences around the clinical side, as well as the patient side too. So if you pop to the next one, Vishaka. And two things to think about here too is, take the existing challenges that we have in healthcare. And so the good thing is, the good or bad thing is, most of these things have not changed, but there is going to be a focus as to either personalized or value-based care. So treating the patient as if, again, they need and want that consumerized experience that they get with Amazon. And so, how can we as the hospital system and or provider extend some of those capabilities that they have to, and then just the exchange of information. So interoperability is going to be critical. So we're not looking to replace any of the EMR or EMR functionality, but how can we make some of that functionality better to make when a patient calls in to ask for a prescription or a medication or schedule an appointment, how can we make that easier so that they don't have to answer the same question 5 times as part of that process into 5 different people? The other thing too is we see a shift definitely in the care delivery model and where it's going to happen. So COVID basically forced that shift. And I think a lot of those hospital systems are saying, hey, do we need to have the IT folks sitting in a building working 40 plus hours a week, most likely? Can we keep them working at home? I know my old hospital, basically it's completely optional now, whether or not they come back into work or not. And even the care process itself. So we've already started the process to shift outside of the hospital to the ambulatory clinics, as well as to home health too, which I think is going to be a big focus moving forward as well too. So, and Corby, to answer your question, we will be sharing these slides out for sure. So you will get access to these. And so, so if you guys have seen us present before, we talk about the primary personas of those patients, clinicians, IT, and security listed across the bottom there. But per what I talked about earlier, how can we facilitate the delivery of those services as they extend outside of the 4 walls into those community-based providers and even at home too? So think about, hey, we're taking care of a diabetes patient at home now. We're going to have a series of devices. They're going to need a series of appointments that are potentially going to be virtual. I just had a virtual visit with my doctor last week, and it was awesome not to have to sit in the waiting room for 25 minutes. But what if I couldn't get connected to that session? There's always going to be issues as well there too. So those are the types of things is even for the at-home based care, we want to create that great experience for them no matter where they are in the process too. So next one. And one thing I always like to, this is a slide I found earlier on, but I always like to reset that, we are a workflow automation engine. ITSM was something that was built after the fact. So I always like to say, hey, where's the way that we have a manual process, whether it's still a paper process, an envelope, a pager that gets exchanged between departments. Those are the types of things that we're looking to optimize. And even with the first the first product, like the second product that you'll see launched here, there's a lot of still paper processes around consent forms, pre-authorization of benefits, those types of things that are not only siloed within the paper side, but also the departments that they will flow through to on the customer side too, whether it's billing or IT, wherever that gets facilitated. So, we always want you to think about things a little differently, and hopefully the sessions today will bring some of those to light too. So Vishaka, next one. And again, just kind of grounding on the personas. Again, we've primarily been focused on the right side with process and security. We have a series of solutions that we've launched around the clinicians and staff, but now the next series of the data model and applications are going to start to extend out to the patient side as well too. So this is what I'm really excited about, that you'll see as Vishaka starts talking about the data model. So. And then just the last thing here too, again, these are, there's the sky's the limit as far as what we can do. We'll have a prescriptive roadmap that Vishaka is going to go through, but there are a number of things that either our customers have built out, our partners have built out, or things that are potentially on our roadmap, which is the color coding here. So again, don't think of us, you may not think of us in the context of patient experience or improving HCAHPS scores, but I really do think that's going to change, especially with the data model that's going to be launched here literally in a couple of weeks. So Vishaka, I think with that, I think I'm handing it over to you.
Great. So, what I'm going to discuss is really what's going to come up in our Rome release, which is in September, and there's some early access that's happening in July timeframe. So what we're actually developing is this healthcare and life sciences service management, and it's a new product. There's two parts. Like I said, in July, there's going to be some early access. In September, there's a full-on general availability. And what it's really built on is CSM. And what we've done is we've built on these core capabilities. We've actually leveraged an industry data model. You all must have heard of HL7, Health Level 7, and the FHIR standards that are, the underpinnings for interoperability across healthcare organizations. And this is huge for us because this is actually our gateway in order to do some of these things that Drew had talked about. And really, it gives us a proven set of standards to leverage and to build on top of in terms of the standards, the architecture, the methodology to enable interoperability and health information exchange. Now, what's core to this is, our functions and the components of Patient 360. And what that is basically, it's a customer central and CSM leveraging the data model. It basically is a view of a patient, and there's some slides in the subsequent material that we'll go through and kind of gives a customer service agent the ability to look at a holistic patient view. So your insurance, your allergies, and that way it limits the amount of times they're going into different systems. The other thing is consent management. So right now, those consent is captured sometimes still very manually, paper scanned into the chart, or, there's no automated way of actually capturing it. And so we're providing the foundation core to our platform that allows us to do consent management. Digital documentation, lots of paper, right, in healthcare. I'm coming from it, the ability to really lessen the amount of paper that we have. There's various forms that have to be completed. We're really looking at digital documentation, which is the forms management piece of it. And on top of this is some out-of-box workflows that we're looking at applying. So what this means is, as we deliver the product in September, these will be pre-built workflows. And for healthcare, it's really around the pre-visit management. When you think about pre-visit management, it's everything that enables that patient to have a successful visit, whether it's, signing the HIPAA consent, getting the prior authorizations from insurance companies, scheduling the visit and figuring out how much it's going to cost in a centralized place so that from a provider standpoint, your employees know exactly what the workflow is and it triggers off different tasks. And then from a patient standpoint, they're getting to-do lists. Because if you imagine, us going in for a procedure, there's a slew of paperwork that we get as patients, and it becomes a little bit overwhelming when you're already having to deal with the stress of having a procedure done. So what we're trying to do is enable efficiency and ease of use. And then on the patient support services standpoint, this is aligned with our life sciences vertical. It's really to enable pharmaceutical companies to have the same type of access and information for patients to have access to drugs or to sign up for clinical trials. And so HCLS is not just focused on provider, it is the life sciences vertical as well. And like I said before, this row here, it's really going to be, this is the early access. So in July, we will be able to have this. And then come September, we're going to have the ability to have those pre-built workflows. So this is our data model, what Drew was kind of alluding to. It is an extension of the existing CSM data model, but it's very specific to healthcare and life sciences. In other words, your customers will be able to leverage all the capabilities of CSM, which are augmented to address the needs of healthcare providers. And this is it's an evolution. We're starting with this base objects, and every quarter, every release, we're going to continue to add different objects to it. And then again, what we're trying to solve for here is a challenge that being able to integrate and align to industry standards. So through this, we will be able to actually have HL7 interfaces that pulls different information from the various systems into the platform, and then to be able to communicate extensively. The other aspect of this is the patient 360, right? So this is what I was talking about. When you think about having a centralized place, so you eliminate the swivel chair and the multiple logging into different systems for your patient services reps. Imagine being able to call in, Julie calling in and having the ability for that agent to have all of the information that they need related to Julie, whether it's her insurance information, what are her upcoming appointments, what programs is she enrolled in, and then also all the information related to just her medical kind of history. And one thing that I just want to point out is, this is just a mock-up. We, again, are not trying to replace the EMRs by any means, but we want to complement it. So all this is configurable based on what information you feel like it would be successful for that patient services rep to be able to answer those questions, be more optimized in terms of their workflow and what they're doing within the call or how they respond to requests. The other thing is, you're able to combine the various touch points that patient has had, whether it's like virtual agent interactions and the ability to just interact with that patient via chat or email. This is truly a workflow automation engine. So the way that you set it up allows for, various components to come into play. And we'll see some of the screens that allow for the workflow automation components in a couple of slides. The other thing that I had touched on is consent management, right? So making it easy for legal and compliance teams to manage consent policies in a single digital location, and then make it easier for patients to be able to consume that and know that they have these tasks that they need to fill out these forms before they present themselves. So, there's two main components to it. One is just really being able to manage and store all the consent policies. Two is being able to send that consent to the patients and capture consent from the patients. And where, in terms of when we actually capture that, it can be stored in ServiceNow, or it can be sent back to the EMR and been localized there. It just kind of depends on, how you want to use the system, but we have the capability to do both. And really what challenge we're trying to solve for here is just being able to manage the multitude of consents. And then just in terms of, sometimes it's a duplicative task on the patient, right? That they've had to do it multiple times. So we just really want a smoother way for the business to be able to collect the information and to store it as well. Here, this is digital documentation. This really makes it possible for patients to efficiently complete documentation in a seamless experience. Again, you might be using various other, Adobe, DocuSign for those capabilities, but there's also from my personal experience from my previous organization, it's sometimes a little bit harder to be able to capture all that information and to trigger workflows off of it. So that's the one big value add here, is that through the ServiceNow platform, you really are able to then capture that information. So let's say FMLA, right? You capture that information from the patient, it triggers the workflows that allows you to get to your release of information department, to have that turnaround time, get that information back to the patient. So what we're really trying to do is just limit the amount of paper-based processes, have a multi-step process to help, fill out the forms. And the forms are very different, right? It's not standard across states. It's not standard, right? Then if you think about from a global perspective, it's even different standards that we have in Europe than they are in the United States. So the ability to have the flexibility to configure to different form types, it's very valuable and could be very dynamic. And then in just terms of the end-to-end workflow, right? So what we want to do is create a seamless experience, not only for the patients, but also for the providers, by setting up a workflow that allows the providers to understand who's on point next to be able to do something, right? Our workflows can interact with any third-party systems. So you see that, as there's a virtual agent that kind of gets the information, the customer agent or the hospital, they get that case, they're able to then trigger various workflows that allow these kind of back office functions to be able to interact with their systems and then continue to provide the workflow and get the task completed. And then in terms of the pre-visit management, so, what we're trying to do here is just streamline the procedure authorization or before they come into the actual appointment, just being able to streamline and efficiently manage their what they need to do, make it easy for them to understand, here's the activities that I need to do, here's a knowledge base that I need to have. And what we're trying to do is just have multiple systems view into one, so that you can manage the request, you can manage the consent, you can manage any of the documentation that's associated, and then distribute that information across teams and with patients as well. But right now, sometimes it's a very poor experience, and there's lack of visibility both on the patient and the provider side, and you don't know who's up next. And so through this workflow, we're able to configure a way for the healthcare agents to be able to streamline what happens next, and then be also able to, make sure the required paperwork, and provide just a very consumer-friendly experience that's configurable. I think one of the main things about our platform is that you don't need to be a developer in order to configure the movement and how these workflows actually work. We have playbooks built in to where, just anybody who's not even a developer can actually build out a workflow so that it's much more easier to actually replicate and to institute in your organization. So this is just a little bit of an example of like the healthcare workplace with the full patient view. I kind of went through this already, but again, these things are configurable. There's the ability to have all the patient information, their activity. This slide really goes through the playbook. So what we deem as playbook is, imagine what it takes to complete the task, right? So in this case of being able to have a consent for a treatment, or pre-authorization for a treatment, you're able to verify the patient information. You're able to see, like, have they signed all the various consent and treatments? Then if there's some reason that the provider has to provide information as well, we're able to then send a task to the provider that says, hey, we need a medical necessity reason for the patient to be authorized for this treatment. And so the provider is able to get into their portal. Similarly, a patient's able to get into their portal and see, here's what I have to have done before I go get my knee surgery. Here's the various types of requests in terms of what I need to do in refills. There's a knowledge base that basically allows you to understand what are the procedure information, what trainings are they going to have to offer. So this is a one-stop shop for the patient. And you're really, and the thing that I love about this is that we are no longer having the patient have to navigate through the healthcare system to figure out, you know, what's happening. We are literally putting the healthcare system in front of the patient to say, in order for you to be successful, here's what you need to do. And here it's all in one location. And I think that that very sentiment of getting to a patient-centric model is really, you know, we're all trying to drive through that with the industry. And this is a great step in order to get there. So similarly, in the life sciences space, you know, life sciences organizations are trying to streamline their patient onboarding practices and prescribe medications or medical devices or discount plans. And so we have the ability to be able to have this digital application for the patient enrollment. We're leveraging the Playbook to really streamline some of these tasks and really apply it so that the patient, the provider, and the pharmaceutical company are in view of what's happening with patients and their details around it. And similarly, there's various trainings and you know, imagine you've seen a pharma commercial and it has all of the disclaimers at the end, right? That actually leads to some patient education. So this workflow allows you to institute that type of patient education as well. So this is just a view of the Playbook for enabling patient services. You can see that there's typically some sort of eligibility requirement in order for patients to get associated with clinical trials. So we have those various requirements that are being met. And then as far as just enabling that, right? So the enrollment for patient services and doing the actual pre-authorization. And then in the case of dispatching the medication and making sure that the availability is there, being able to loop that into the workflows as well. And the reason why, you know, we wanted to show these is because it's flexible, right? Between provider and life sciences behind the scenes, it's the same platform. And you can see that how it can distinguish itself to configure and fit these types of use cases. And the other thing I just want to mention is just because we're starting off these two use cases, it's easy to configure the workflows. We're actually looking for design partners, customers to really help solve some of the other challenges that there are in terms of workflows. So while these are the first two that are built out of the box, it's definitely not the end all be all. We will continue to build on these workflows as well. And in the few minutes that I have, I do want to share where this is going, right? So we've shared EMR operations. Drew went through some of that in the Paris release. In Rome, we had more around the streamlining of the patient care. That's what we're delivering. That's what you just saw. That's going to happen in September. And then in 2022, we're really going to focus on supporting remote and home care scenarios. This kind of includes the device and patient monitoring aspect. How do you actually get field services and, you know, schedule device repairs outside of the hospital walls? Drew had that one slide that actually spoke about care shifting, right? Through the pandemic, it became more virtual, and now you see even more prevalence of care going back into the home. How are we as healthcare providers and institutions set up to help support that? So we are going to be focused a little bit more around, you know, the security aspect, the scheduling aspect, and the whole orchestration of resources and devices to support remote and home health. And then lastly, you know, this is just our provider capability map. This is like our end all be all state of where we would want to try to have some solutions in place and complement your existing infrastructure and the way that you actually carry out your workflows. You can see here, it's a little bit of an eyesore, but it's just it's really to represent that we are committed to providing experiences and workflows and making life easier for provider organizations. ServiceNow is investing heavily in the healthcare industry. You know, we have resources available. We are actively looking at how we can actually partner and engage and think bigger, but still make the solutions matter in the market. And so with that, I will just close out to see if there's any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Yes, thanks, Vishaka. So there were a ton of questions in chat, and I think I got to most of them. I will answer a couple here. Just the last couple seconds here. And I typed a small novel, but if there's any I can dig into a little bit, definitely reach out offline. But the last one that I didn't quite get to, just from the patient data concern. So there's two different aspects to that, right? So we'll have the ability to sign a business associates agreement, which we do standardly when folks have PHI on the platform itself. So there is the legal side, which we do all the time. The second thing too, which I think is more relevant, is the segregation of the patient data. So there's two different aspects that we put controls around for the patient data side as well. So the first would be any type of encryption that you'd need, whether it be table-based, field-based, or even full database encryption. Of course, that will be an option. I believe it's actually going to be required, right, Vishaka? I think it's not even going to be an option to not have that encryption in place. And then the second piece is to have the right auditing and controls from an ACL perspective. So the ACLs are the access control lists, where you can limit who has ability. So we'll have out of the box roles. It will say only these folks have access to the PHI. So you'll be able to segment out who has the ability to truly view that versus anyone that can view an incident inside of the incident table as well. So and there will also be enhanced, or the ability to do logging, and so can you report out and say who has viewed this record too. So there's the out of the box logging, but the ability to show, because I know that's what I had to do, is say, hey, who viewed this record at any given point in time too. So we want to be able to facilitate that as well too. So Lee, I see you out there. Good to see you. So hospital at home use cases, absolutely. Again, that's, I think, a little further down the road. We did talk about that as well, but definitely, I know we've talked about pursuing that with you guys at Asante as well. So we can definitely pursue that. Robert Bailey, real quick, and Vishak, you can chime in here too, is any consideration for HL7 integration for application such as ITOM? The good thing is the plan is to have a full, we split out the concept of integration and interoperability. So we want to have direct integrations in with the EMRs so that we can dynamically pull that data that we saw a little bit earlier, and have a more holistic interoperability strategy so that if you do want to pull information in from other systems, you can do that as well too. And again, I think that's gonna, the long-term goal we want to have is to have the concept of an Epic spoke, right? So that spoke will theoretically be able to be pulled into the data model so that you can use any type of information within any type of application on the platform, whether that's ITOM, the healthcare life sciences service management that you just saw, ITSM, wherever that is, just be able to pull that data in and provide that information. We do, and again, this is even on the ITOM roadmap, is pulling in information and alerts from System Pulse, those types of things. Folks are doing that right now too. That's not an HL7, that's more of a, Epic has an API there that we can plug into as well too. So, and I think, oh, the licensing one real quick too, Chris mentioned it, but you know, we're not going to license for every patient. It's more the person doing the work on the back end or the fulfiller. So we've mapped out whether it's the patient services rep that's going to be touching, answering those questions, or the billing persona, whoever that is. The actual person that's submitting the request or doing the call does not need to have a license there for sure. So I think
there is a question that just came up in the Q&A that is your interoperability solution with Epic via Epic's App Orchard?
Oh, okay. So not yet. That is the long-term goal. We are heavily down the path of determining, again, what that integration looks like. But that is the long-term eventual plan. But there is, Epic has a rev sharing model, which we're open to. We're just working through those details with our legal team. But absolutely, it is the plan to have a component of this on App Orchard, so that it is 1000% supported by Epic as part of this process. So great question. Any other ones, Chris, that I missed?
No, Drew, I think we're current.
Okay, cool. Well, any further follow-up, definitely reach out to Vishaka or myself. I know there's a lot of interest in even that early adopter piece. It's going to be in what we call control go-to-market. with a data model. And then Mr. Wiltshire, I saw you emailed me, but and Dr. Milligan, if you want to dig in a little deeper, we can definitely reach out to and get into some more details there. So we're a tad ahead of schedule, which is fine by me. I think we're going to transition to the Stanford team here around the mobility and enterprise. And this is a really cool story in doing the prep with Rajesh and Christine around their mobile journey. And so a quick introduction, again, Christine, again, this is, I'll go through parts of their bio, but you know, she's been an IT leader for 25 years at Stanford, was part of their significant rollout for their $1.4 billion hospital that they just rolled out, I think within the last couple of years too, and also around managing the infrastructure, architecture, business continuity, service management side too. So, and then Rajesh, again, 32 years experience with EHR. He started when he was 10 years old. So similar experience around applications, software development, technology services management as well too, as well as the implementation from an Epic architect manager as well. So he oversaw the Epic hosting endeavor there too that they went through as well at Stanford Children's. So, I think with that, if you guys want to add to your introductions, Christine, I think I'm handing it off to you, and feel free to take the screen capture there and fire away.
Thank you, Drew. Pull up the full screen. Thank you, Drew. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Yang, Director of Architecture, Infrastructure, and Technologies at Stanford Children's Health. Rajesh?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rajesh Sharma. I'm the Manager of IT Application Services here at Stanford Children's Health.
And we also have our Senior Application Architect, Ann Tao, who is the brain behind our mobility solutions. And then she's joining us with the demo and support. First, I would like to share some highlights about Stanford Children's Health. Stanford Children's Health was founded by Lucille Salter-Packer in 1991. Earlier this month, we celebrated two very significant achievements and milestones: the 30th anniversary of our hospitals, and our organization was named among the top 10 children's hospitals in the nation by the U.S. News and World Report. Stanford Children is a pediatric and obstetric health network. We located in San Francisco Bay Area, and then we are a teaching hospital of Stanford School of Medicine with 397 beds and 65 remote locations across Northern and Central California. Some additional facts and the numbers to just share with everyone. Now on to our mobile journey. I will first provide an overview, and then Rajesh will do a deep dive and a live demo. So prior to 2019, Stanford Children's was on a shared instance of ServiceNow with our managed service providers. We ran basic ServiceNow functionalities, and enhancements were quite limited because they could impact other clients on the same instance. In 2019, we insourced our infrastructure services and implemented our own instance of ServiceNow. At that time, we immediately saw new opportunities with the mobile app to improve several areas of employee enablement. Providing access, transparency to the employees, increasing satisfaction, and ultimately reducing cost by increasing self-service workflows. A few issues we were looking to address with the new mobile app. First one, the big complaint we had was the customers not knowing what's going on with their IT tickets after it was created. We tried the daily open request extract and made it available on the intranet. And then there was a workflow that customer will call service desk and create another new ticket and just for the inquiry. As you can imagine, very cumbersome and unsatisfying. Another challenge was that users not reporting issues timely or just not reporting at all. Often the key information was also missing on the reported incident. For IT folks doing support, you know how important that is. User feedback indicated that they just need ways for quick input, attach pictures or files, avoid calling service desk and be put on hold when they are in the middle of patient care or other critical tasks, especially they are not in front of a computer. In addition, customer satisfaction has always been a focus of our IS department. It has been one of our core goals for the last few years. Customers are likely to participate and complete surveys if they don't need to stop and figure out how to complete a survey. So with the Now Mobile, we found solutions for all of us. In our mobile app, users can check the status on just their request, add comments, attach files as needed. They will receive notification on the phone when the analyst updates the ticket. Report a problem only has 4 required fields in our Now Mobile. Service desk contact card was accessible from our home screen of the Now Mobile to facilitate a direct call from the app to the service desk. One-click completion of the CSAT survey, the new form, and the pending survey widget improved our response rate significantly. Since we simplified our form and as well as launched the Now Mobile, the survey response rate has been consistently above 20%, and the CSAT score is 4.9 out of 5. So now, early 2020, when COVID hit, we found that Now Mobile, provided a perfect platform to support several employee-facing emerging needs. We quickly added asset request and tracking forms to facilitate the work-from-home workforce deployment. A working remote feedback form was also launched and to solicit feedback, and our HR team monitored those queues last year consistently so they can respond to the issue and concern quickly. For all employees working on site, a daily health attestation is required when entering the facility. We developed this one-click self-health reporting form. All our executive team members installed the mobile app. A story is that the executive office is across the street from the hospital, and then when the execs, like our COO, Rick Mejean, walk to the hospital across the street, he pulls up on a mobile phone, the app, click one button to complete the attestation. He receives the notification right away. And then when he walks to the welcome desk in the hospital main entries, he just shows that notification, and then that's done. And then he can use the same attestation from the notification section for the subsequent entries on the same day. So the success story of this form is we averaged 2,500 entries per day from our employees. And so far, we have logged almost 800,000 entries since May 2020. The last thing I would like to call out on this slide is our guiding principle. As Rajesh goes through the demo, you will clearly see the emphasis on all of those in our design development. So now I hand it over to Rajesh to talk about the technical aspect of the Now Mobile implementation and the demo that. Rajesh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Christine. The ServiceNow platform allows access to your instance from anywhere using the Now Mobile app. It offers access to latest features, integration with virtual agent, live chat with service desk agents, and continuous support. It is built on the premise of mobile first, allows you to get started using fast performing base system applications that are optimized for mobile friendly experiences. It uses native features on your mobile phone to allow calls, display push notifications, and navigation information. It also allows you to use of your camera to scan barcodes, create attachments, and use photo search to get assistance. As part of the platform, Mobile Studio Developer Tools is present that allows you to build custom applications tailored to your specific needs. You can create applications in a simple low-code interface. The framework is easy to adapt to, and I'm going to present to you how we did it at our organization, and it offers a lot of out-of-box core features. It provides enterprise-grade security and enterprise mobility management integration. The app can be downloaded easily for your Android or iOS device using the app stores. At Stanford Children's Health, Now Mobile application is available to our users in our Intune COM portal, which is our EMM solution for devices enrolled in Intune. Christine, next slide, please. Christine, can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. As Christine mentioned, our mobile journey started after we upgraded to the New York release. ServiceNow out of the box Now Mobile app provided a list of features for general users. However, what we discovered, a lot of the functionalities didn't work well for our business needs. We utilized the out of box mobile features as a foundation and customize it to meet our specific needs. To give you an example, we aligned catalog and requests with self-service portal. We altered the fields on incidents as well as requests. We modified the user experience design to include various features. Our customized app version provides an easy-to-use interface focused on beneficial functionalities for our users. We opted for a variety of use case scenarios as part of our Now Mobile app design. Report a problem, URL applets for popular catalog items, take a survey, self-help attestation, help desk contact info card, push notifications, custom global search, chat with a chatbot or a live agent. For deployment, we socialize the new mobile app through our IS newsletters, all user communication, tip sheets on our internet site on how to install, connect, and use the mobile app. Christine, next screen, please. For the design principle, we chose simple and usable at the core. This is in alignment with our CTO's vision. We used standardization, personalized user experience, and made sure it offered a seamless experience across different devices, following industry best practices. Security and ensuring PAI, PHI is protected is always one of our organization's main goals. We ensured that our custom app fully adhered to IS security policies. This was achieved by encryption of description fields and attachments when a user submits a ticket. We also adopted several additional out-of-box security features, like blur the application on the mobile device when the app is not in focus, clear the copy-paste clipboard data when the app enters in the background, and block the ability to share content. Next slide, please. So here's a showcase of our mobile app. I'm going to welcome you to Stanford Children's Now Mobile app here, which offers IS service desk to your fingertips. It allows you to submit, track, and update tickets, both for incidents and requests on the go. You may complete the self-health reporting attestation with one click. It allows you to complete a customer satisfaction survey when your ticket is closed. You may chat with Lucy, which is our own virtual assistant, or you can talk to a live agent well within the app. If you want to call a service desk for a widespread urgent issue, the contact phone card that I'm going to show in the demo comes very handy. Christine, next slide, please. So let me share my screen here. So let me walk you next to a demo for Now Mobile app. The design includes 4 tabs: Home, Services, Notifications, Settings, which are part of the navigation bar at the bottom of the screen. Home tab is fully customized, and it presents a landing screen when a user logs in. The first tile at the top of the home screen includes 4 most popular services or ticket forms. You can report a problem service to report an incident. This is the most commonly used for us. The other 3 app services are using URL applets pointing to the mobile version of Service Portal. We decided to make the home screen focus on My Items. As you can see in the second tile, we have a section which includes My Request and Service to Complete. My Request is an out-of-box function with custom development that displays active tickets requested by or requested for the user. It is true for incidents, request items, as well as clinical work orders. My Request gives you a list view of all your active tickets. For each ticket in the list, you can click on it and you will be presented with 2 tabs. One for showing the updates, and the other one shows you the details. Now, talking about Service to Complete, it's again a custom development utilizing the mobile version of Service Portal. After a ticket is submitted, a ticket is resolved, users may take the survey. So they are taken to this screen. As you can see here, we present our users with 3 buttons and a field to put their comments. So I'm going to select one, I go to next, I go to close, submit it, and it's all done. Now, let me talk about the third tile, which you see in the middle. This is for our self-health reporting. Basically, what we have done, we have customized this. It runs on the native mobile applet that allows users to submit their attestation for COVID-19 symptoms. It runs as a one-click function. And I'm going to give a demo here. So you click on it, you read the attestation verbiage. You have 2 options, either to select I do not attest or I attest. As soon as this is done, you click on select button, submit button, and it's all done. You see a banner on the top, and the same notification ends up under the notifications tab. And this stays in the notification tab until you log out. So we mandate all our staff to attest before they enter their workplaces. Let me go back to the home again. The last tile that you see here is for our info, our contact info card. It gives you the information about our service desk. If you click on the card, it takes you to the service desk contact information. You can click on the call number button and you can make a call right from there. So as you can see, the design is very simple. So as I was mentioning before, the core features that we wanted to implement, we wanted to make them available using a simplified and a usable mode. And let me also show the services tab. So you have the option to pick the services right from the first tile, where it shows up as one of the 4 popular services, or you can click on the services tab, where you have the option to choose any of the catalog categories and the types which are available. So as Christine mentioned before, we added a lot of forms for COVID-19 responses and support. I'm going to give you an example for one of them. This form was designed as a self-service tool to declare assets in your possession during COVID-19 work from home period to help information services to track the assets. It's a simple form. You have the option to pick your assets and then you submit it. So that's pretty much for the demo. So Christine, can we move on to the next slide, please? Sorry, let me stop my sharing here. Christine, can you go back to the next slide? Thank you. So as part of the learning and feedback for our non-mobile implementation, we got overall positive feedback for our non-mobile app since we launched it. Our users think report a problem and the self-help reporting applet are very handy and convenient to use. Taking a picture using your camera and attaching it to an incident or a request is very helpful. However, we feel that it will be nice if the app can overcome following shortcomings. When a new version of the non-mobile is published to the store, the app prompts user to upgrade it. Currently, we don't have a functionality like this today. We started our non-mobile app in New York release, in which mobile user analytics was not available. Another shortcoming that we have seen is when the data is updated, the screen on the app does not auto-refresh to reflect the latest update. From app development and support perspective, we feel mobile portal pages can be utilized to achieve certain functionalities, which are already available on the service portal. ServiceNow out of the box, now mobile offers a great framework foundation to allow customers to customize based upon their specific needs. From a development perspective, we have learned ServiceNow now mobile involves multiple application scopes. Customization and code promotion is at times a bit confusing and tedious, but still it works. Mobile Studio is a very cool tool to use. However, the Studio alone cannot achieve all customization that we would like to do. Native mobile applets are associated with data from database. This may require additional custom table or columns created. From support perspective, we would like to see that ServiceNow releases test application to customer before a new version is published. Also, it will be helpful if customers can download and install different versions of app to replicate user issues. Thanks very much for your time. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christine so that she can talk about our mobility roadmap.
Thank you, Rajesh. To continue our mobile journey, here are a few things that we're focusing on in the next couple of years. Increased mobile adoption is on our annual roadmap for this year and next. Doesn't matter how great the app is, if without the user adoption, it doesn't really provide value. Providing a easy to use solution to everyday workflow is the key to spark and retain the interest. So the self-health reporting widget Rajesh just demoed is a great example. Our employees work on site, they love it, and then they use it daily, and then they were telling their coworkers about it. And that's how we, really see the dramatic increase of the adoption. And we will continue to explore this type of opportunities. For example, our organization will be implementing a hybrid return to work model with many hoteling spaces built in the hospital and the administrative buildings. While looking into the ServiceNow Safe Workplace Suite to help with room reservations and other functionalities of this transition, the first requirement was identified was the mobile ability, and then if it is part of the non-mobile app, which Safe Workplace is. The frequently pushed out how-to and daily, weekly quick tips will help us to reinforce key functionalities as well as new features developed. We want our users in the app often and then expand their use cases. Prior to COVID, there was already a huge demand from our IS team to be able to perform more of their on-call duties or even just everyday duties on the go, including emergency change approvals, not relying on the laptop everywhere they go. We sent a survey to all IS users, and then based on their responses, we ranked the features as shown in the table on this slide. The home screen of the mobile agent will be flexed by the roles, so leader will see different widgets from analysts and engineers, and then who are working on the tickets. So for example, leaders will have SLA, CSAT follow-ups, and approvals on the home screen, when the analysts and engineers will be seeing their own incident requests and my team's dashboards. So our target go live day for the mobile agent is August, September of this year. More and more operational areas in the hospital are recognizing the benefit of ServiceNow mobile app for their analyst-like workflows. Our finance department will have its own catalog guidance and analytics reporting for budget and business planning workflows. And the leaders across the enterprise can create requests, check progress, make updates, while finance team can manage and exchange information with the requesters easily and more real time. HR and payroll also have similar ideas with their specific workflows that we're working on as well. So this concludes our presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. I think most of the questions were answered by Anne, but you know, Rajesh and Christine, if you want to glance at those, I think that were pretty good. The only one I think that was, no, I think they were all answered. So one thing I would kind of point out too real quick is, you know, I heard a couple times the concept of one click, right? And I love the fact that you guys, even though doctors are about the smartest people in the world, they're not necessarily IT folks or even any of the clinicians or folks using the system. So I love the fact that you guys focused on that ease of use and simplicity. One question I had maybe for you guys, just since we have a couple minutes, is how long did it take? I know it's iterative process. You just showed your roadmap, Christine, but how long did it take the initial rollout? And then maybe a second part of that, was there any pushback, or was it seemed like it was pretty well received, right?
Rajesh, you want to answer that, how long it took for the non-mobile? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, it took us between 4 to 5 months from start to finish to build it, test it, and deploy it. And as I explained before, it was very well received by our users. We did have some challenges, but then COVID came, and when we rolled out the functionality to do the self-health reporting, it led to the more adoption from our users, because everyone saw a need where you click on a button, it brings up the verbiage, you click on another button, and you're done with it. Versus you go to the door, you scan the barcode, then fill in the information about who you are, because it's not only for staff, but also for contractors and visitors. So they were using a web application, but then on mobile, for our staff, it became very handy, where they can do it with a single click. So I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, and the good thing is, like you said, you're gathering feedback from the end users too, right? So as you kind of build in the future, I think that's critical. So great. Yeah, thanks you guys so much. And tell Anshul I said hi. And I think we actually have a break schedule. We're a tad ahead of schedule here. So we will take a break here and be at 10 after the hour, and stick around. A quick intro to David. So he is the product owner at ServiceNow at University of Wisconsin Health since 2018. He's been the product owner and really was instrumental in us building out that EMR help product I mentioned kind of at the kickoff that we launched back in December. Wouldn't have happened without Mr. Wiltshire and Mr. Brian Larkworthy. So, so with that, David, I think I'll hand it to you for the next session here, and feel free to start your sharing. I'll stop mine.
All right.
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. You guys are seeing the slide and not the presenter view, hopefully.
Yep.
All right, excellent. Okay. Great. Okay, yeah, so my name is David Wiltshire. I am the product owner for the ServiceNow program at UW Health. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about how we are leveraging App Engine on ServiceNow to return purpose to work for our employees. If you don't know, I think it's been rebranded. It might now be called Now Creator. But when I say App Engine, what we're talking about today in the context of this presentation is actually leveraging the parts of ServiceNow that let us build our own applications on the platform. So a little bit about us at a glance. We are the Academic Medical Center as part of the UW Health system. We are affiliated with the School of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We're in South Central Wisconsin and Northern Illinois. And a little bit about us, kind of by the numbers. I always find these interesting just as you're looking at customer presentations. We're about 20,000 staff, about 1,700 physicians, 700 residents, and about 1,000 beds. A little bit of a compliance slide. Just note, UW Health does not formally endorse any product or service. So a little bit of what I want to do today is maybe change the way you think about ServiceNow in your organization. Not just seeing it as kind of like an IT or HR focused service management or ticketing tool, but really seeing it as a service delivery or digital experience platform throughout your organization. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about what my team has done for the last year with ServiceNow at UW Health. A lot of our efforts have been focused on COVID-19 and supporting our employees through the pandemic. That started with the build of a financial assistance app for our most vulnerable employees, transitioned into a COVID-19 symptom tracking application to help aid return to work after employees were exposed. We eventually did a vaccine risk scoring and prioritization application for how to effectively and equitably distribute the vaccine within our phase 1A population of about 13,000 people, and then moving on to actually scheduling those vaccine clinics through ServiceNow. If you had asked me, about a year ago this time, if I thought we would be doing this stuff, I wouldn't have thought that. It was pretty crazy. But what we found was that when those kind of asks came, we kind of both had the process in place, but also the technical capability in ServiceNow to meet those needs. But we didn't get there overnight. So, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our journey with the platform and maybe give you some ideas for your organization as well. So this really does kind of reflect our app development journey on ServiceNow. Kind of down the left side are kind of major areas, major applications we've developed at UW Health and kind of a timeline. Those red bars show basically the time from when we first started build to the time when the end users were really starting to first use them in production. And we're going to come back to this and talk about it a little bit more, but kind of as you look at kind of what you saw earlier in the presentation from ServiceNow, I can absolutely confirm we're doing a lot of that kind of work in ServiceNow today. We manage huge amounts of clinical content. We manage a lot of governance and process around build of the EMR. and not just IS build, but clinical governance of clinical content and how it gets built in the EMR. Our nursing shared governance groups use it for managing nursing shared governance councils. Our procurement and finance and legal teams use it for service management. Our hospital security teams use ServiceNow. Our health information management department, our Epic CareLink and health information exchange programs use ServiceNow to manage those programs. We use ServiceNow to manage scheduling variances within our specialty care clinics, and actually how we schedule patients, dealing with physician complaints. And then, we actually just recently built an app to manage all of our regional contracting for our physicians that work out in the region, and also our services we provide out in the region, like imaging. Those contracts are all managed through ServiceNow, and we actually, run some of that billing as well as provider per diems and compensation out of an app on ServiceNow. So we're going to take a few of these as examples, but just kind of giving you an idea of where you might think of using this, and kind of as I see it, the scope in your enterprise is pretty wide. So I want to define that area of opportunity as I see it, talk a little bit about the journey we had building our program, where you might look to start, and kind of my thoughts on how you can best leverage ServiceNow in your organization. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a story of how I came to ServiceNow. Before I worked with our ServiceNow program, I was working with a different team building a custom app for our trauma program. Our main campus is a level 1 trauma center. We do adult and peds traumas there. And we had built an application, or we're in the process of building one, for managing trauma team arrival times and automatically documenting those into the EMR. You can't really schedule a trauma, you can simulate it, but there's nothing like reality to really test a product. So we were spending some time in the nurses' stations early in the morning, just kind of waiting for a trauma to arrive. And we had a trauma one day that came, and the patient didn't make it. And we kind of watched our clinicians and our nurses kind of work through that with the EMS staff, and then later the family. And as a technologist, you're sitting there and thinking, like, our job is to help make solutions that help people, and having I think a pretty stark realization that in that moment, there is nothing we can build, nothing we can solution for them that is going to fix that or keep that from happening. We can't prevent those things from happening. And that really shaped, I think, a lot of my vision of how we use technology in the organization. But when I came into the ServiceNow program, really saw that as kind of a guiding light for how we use ServiceNow at UW Health. And one of the ways I think about that, in the case of that trauma patient and our clinicians in that moment, I can't stop those moments from happening. We can't, make those moments better. The best thing we can do with ServiceNow for our employees at UW Health is make sure that we have given them every amount of mental and emotional energy they can have when they go into those situations. And looking at a modern enterprise and at the modern health system, there are 1,000 little mental and emotional energy vampires throughout our enterprise that suck that energy out of people all day long. So as we look at ServiceNow and where we want to use it in the organization, we really want to find a way to use it to reduce those kind of waste elements in process and eliminate friction points across the enterprise for our staff. We talk all the time about burnout in healthcare, and often it is capital B burnout and big systemic things that are very difficult to change, even at an individual system level. But my team, we focus a lot on there's lots of little b burnout throughout people's days, and we are very empowered to be able to fix that. That little no email piece is on there kind of as a joke. I'm not a huge fan of email. I think there's a reason people spend all this time looking at life hacks about how to manage your inbox that don't ever really get at the core problem, which is that you're reflexively checking your inbox every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, because that's where work happens. And that's where work happens because it's often unstructured and ill-defined. And when that's happening in an ill-defined way, you're spending all your time managing something that could be managed more efficiently and generating a lot of waste there. So if you think about your staff, we're a teaching hospital. We have a whole crop of new residents that come into the organization every year, and we tell them, hey, go out and navigate UW Health. By the way, if you need to do a facilities request, that's over here in this system. And if you need an HR request, that's over here. And oh, you need to submit travel expenses. Well, that's this system, and good luck finding that on our intranet. So, we look at ServiceNow as a way to try and start to bring that waste down and bring those services to our employees rather than sending them out to find them. So if you're maybe with me up to this point, like, where do you start? Where did we start? Maybe you've purchased App Engine from ServiceNow. Maybe you've built some apps, but never like a really true dedicated scoped app in the platform. You're looking at the kind of a green field. You've never built something. I distinctly remember looking at this. And so kind of what I want to talk you through today is our approach to where we started and where you might be able to learn from that. So if I'm assuming a lot of folks on this call, you're coming from an IS department or an HR department. We are big service delivery departments. We typically have deep experience in that area. There's lots of service management frameworks. And so when we look at where we were going to take ServiceNow beyond the IS department, our initial goal was like, stick with what we know, right? And I would encourage you to do that. And there's a few reasons for that. One, ServiceNow excels at service management. It's their kind of background. It's where they came from. We know they do it well. And we know if we're looking at a service management use case, even if it's outside of a traditional kind of environment, ServiceNow is going to do well at that. So that's absolutely where I would recommend you start. We also kind of look at it small in that sentence because it takes time for a technical team. If you've never built anything on ServiceNow, there's lots to learn, and even a very skilled developer who has deep software development background takes time to get up to speed on ServiceNow and the way you do things in ServiceNow. And you need to give folks, I think, a low risk environment to try and fail and learn and try again. So finding those small use cases to start are great. You also need time to develop technical standards. ServiceNow as a platform has lots of functionality from an app development perspective that enables you to go very quickly. I'm going to show you later on in the presentation something we built in 5 days for COVID-19. That is absolutely possible. You saw those development timelines I showed you on our timeline earlier. You can go very quickly, but you have to have a process around how you go quickly so that when you're ready to, you can sustain that and do it well. And that really goes into kind of developing some governance standards for the platform if you don't have development standards. I don't think there's a shortcut there. We've shared our kind of development process and standards with other teams, and we're always happy to if anybody wants to reach out. But I do think that's a deeply personal journey for your team as well. We talk a little bit about team technical capability. Our very first apps had almost no service portal component. There was very little customer facing components besides what ServiceNow gives you out of the box. We built that capability over time as the team got more comfortable and had more time to develop. So, starting with those small use cases lets you keep it simple as you develop that capability on the platform. The last thing I'd say is it's important if you're in a platform owner role like I am, you start building apps on ServiceNow, have a demand management framework started before you begin, because what we have found is that teams start working with this technology, seeing the impact it can have day to day in their work life, and the asks start coming very quickly. The last part I'll say here, give your users time to adjust. So we have this kind of start, grow, transform. It's actually the same kind of approach we take with our users. We try to get them in the platform as soon as possible, get them to production using the tool very quickly with a very basic product, and then we work with them to develop and iterate on that over time. Part of that is because there is so much functionality in ServiceNow, it can be overwhelming for new people. You start telling a team that has no service management background, no experience using tooling like ServiceNow, which we take for granted, I think, in some of the larger departments like HR and IT that have done service management for a long time. You start talking to them about, hey, you can have mobile and there's SLAs and you want custom notifications, and would you like this integrated automation with one of your vendors? Like, it can be very overwhelming for people. So we often encourage start small. You can come back. The best thing about building on ServiceNow for our team is that we are able to add features very rapidly and with very little effort once we have that MVP or that minimum viable product built for those end users. And we let them come to us and really define what they need. They might say, hey, is there a way in ServiceNow we could standardize our communications with customers, and we might say, hey, yeah, here's quick message templates, you can use that. Or they might say, hey, we're really having a problem with work in progress. Is there a better way we could visualize our work in progress? And we could say, hey, yeah, here's Kanban boards. Let's show you how that works. But we don't go build things that, you know, we don't hear from the customer that they need. And then that last section, transform, this is where we really start to see value from ServiceNow for a lot of teams. We get them in the platform, we start to expose them to the different components, and we start to be able to find, as we structure process and define it with our customers, that we're actually able to automate things and start using some of the capabilities of ServiceNow to transform the way people work. And I say knowledge workers here, there's enormous amounts of knowledge work that happens in a health system. And if you were walking through a factory and you saw someone working on an assembly line, having to walk 10 feet away to get a part for everything they were building, constantly back and forth, you would say, hey, that's wasteful. Let's bring the stuff you need to where you're working. But we don't think anything at all about having a nurse manager go to 10 different SharePoint sites to complete some process and 8 different spreadsheets, and she's got to email it back and forth with 5 different people. And I think we have a huge opportunity within health systems to use ServiceNow as a way to kind of standardize and optimize kind of knowledge work processes across the health system. So I wanted to come back to this one more time, just to really hammer home that kind of technical standards piece. If you look at this timeline from about 2017 to 2019, you can see we were building applications on ServiceNow, but they were taking us a long time. We had some bumps and scrapes in there. We were learning how to use Studio. We were learning how to get our apps connected up to GitHub. We were learning how to really put together a pipeline for development. We were learning our demand management framework. In that same time, we had 2 developers leave the organization. We had to hire 2 more and then train them. But then in kind of late 2019, we really started to hit our stride and got to what I think was a pretty templated license plate factory style build for ServiceNow apps. So what I'm going to do as we go through this is take you through a few of our examples, kind of simple, kind of medium complexity to some of the more complex work we did in COVID, and talk through some of that as a way of kind of highlighting some of those use cases and how we think about app builds. But I really do want to highlight that piece in particular. Again, you can go so fast with ServiceNow, it can be a blessing and a curse. You can very quickly do very dumb things, and you can very quickly do great things. So it is, I think, very important that as you look at ServiceNow in an organization, it grew, I think, in a lot of places out of service management. But if you're looking to start building your own tools on ServiceNow, I think you really want to approach it with the same rigor that you would any kind of custom app development in your organization. So one of the first examples of an app we had built internally, this is one of our earliest real true use cases. We had met with our medical interpreter services group, and this app is basically a subset of very simple asset management and some very simple request management. Nothing we're unfamiliar with in IT space, right? So their process was essentially doing iPad checkout. Nurses from units would come to medical interpreter services and they would say, hey, I need a language interpreted with this patient. For common languages, we have interpreters in-house, but for uncommon ones, we use the tele-interpreter service. They take that iPad back to the patient room, and an interpreter can work with the clinical team and the patient. Those iPads were all checked out on paper. Nurses would come down from the unit, find out there's none in stock. Papers would have all the problem that paper does. Papers are lost, sign-outs are lost, signatures are illegible, you know, everything you could imagine. And when the manager of this team met with my team, they had lost like 24 iPads in about 6 months and were desperate for a solution. We worked with them on that and tried to kind of understand their process. And as we worked through that, found out that probably the worst part of this entire process is they had a skilled medical interpreter who came to UW Health with a mission to help patients communicate with our care teams, who was spending all their time administering this giant 6-inch folder of paper signatures, trying to keep track of these iPads for the organization, and probably the worst use of her time you could imagine. So what we ended up building them in ServiceNow is a pretty simple tool, leveraging the front-end components of ServiceNow to let nurses, people on the units, check out iPads without ever having to leave the unit. The inventory is real time. They can see what iPads are available, no more wasting time running all the way down there to find out there are none in stock. They're able to actually take them directly from interpreter services and run them up if they need to. Those iPads can be tracked through their life cycle until they're returned. And right before the end of that development work, the manager had said, hey, we're starting to, through the testing with you, see the kinds of things we can do in ServiceNow. Could we use this for managing our document translation service? Because we do document translation of consent forms and patient education materials, and there's always a long queue of things we need to get to, and it'd be great to visualize that. And that took a day and a half to add into what we had already built for them. So, you know, it was kind of a bonus win right there at the end. We hadn't even planned to do it, but it was very simple to add for them as part of that work. The kind of outcome of that, right, we kind of massively reduced that iPad leakage, saved a lot of folks a lot of time, made that process a lot more streamlined. We were then able to kind of in that transform realm start to use some of the automation from ServiceNow to say, hey, you know, we see you missed your check-in date. Do you want to return those little reminders for people here and there? Finally, having a real-time inventory of what was available. But I think most importantly, right, is that interpreter who was doing anything but interpreting was back to actually doing the job she came to UW Health to do. You know, not managing a process that machine could manage for her. So second use case, a little bit more advanced. This is content management. So what you saw the ServiceNow team talking about with document management, that's similar to what we're doing here. And then also a piece of service delivery that we'll get into. This is for our patient and family education team. So what they're responsible for at UW Health is not just doing education engagements with our patient and families, but also managing what we call health fact sheets, or HFFYs, health fact sheets for you. You've probably gotten one of these from a doctor visit before. They're, you know, sometimes the handouts that say like what to expect at your upcoming colonoscopy or your upcoming mammogram. And sometimes they're simple one-pagers, but sometimes they're dozens and dozens of pages long. They're very complicated kind of document packets around, you know, transplant procedures or more complicated procedures. All of these documents have to be managed for clinical content. There's a whole process every 3 years where they have to be reviewed by risk and compliance teams, by clinical authors, by nurses, by education specialists for readability. And when you're managing thousands of these on that kind of cycle, the team was doing it through a few spreadsheets and about 5 different email inboxes. It was exhausting for the providers who were trying to keep up with this and have many other duties. It was exhausting for the team who was spending all this time trying to manage the review of these documents while also trying to still do their actual mission of educating patients as well. So again, we saw like a huge opportunity here to kind of leverage pieces of ServiceNow to help this team kind of optimize. One of the things we built them in ServiceNow was a simple database to be able to track and version control all these fact sheets, which is something they weren't doing really well before, and something that was really important for our compliance team because we needed to be able to say for a given encounter on a given date, if a patient was given a fact sheet, what version was the published version at that time that would be considered part of their medical record for potential, you know, any kind of compliance use case where we'd need that information. So this database lets the team manage all of the fact sheets. They store them all in ServiceNow. They can fully version control them. And then we were able to start putting together kind of a tool for them to actually let them start to visualize the different steps in the workflow they need to get these from reviewed to published, all the way out to published on our public website. And as they started to use ServiceNow more and more, we started to say, okay, well, now you're starting to see we've got bottlenecks in certain pieces of the process. Where can we start to leverage ServiceNow to measure maybe the turnaround time at that stage in the process and really drill down into how to optimize it? For the first time, this team had full visibility end to end of every step in that workflow and the ability to actually communicate with the provider on, hey, yeah, this thing's going to be ready. It's at this stage in the process, which is something they never really had an effective way to do, certainly not in a heads up manner. That eventually grew into a full portal that they're able to use with the different departments who are responsible for these health fact sheets to actually see ahead and actually start to plan and resource for, hey, we know we've got 30 of these coming up for review next month. let's make sure that's good. Let's check with the department, and let's maybe start to consolidate some of our authors. What can we do to help optimize the way we do the review of these documents with the teams? And what we ended up doing was starting to leverage some of ServiceNow's automation. When a document comes up for a 3-year review, we're able to have ServiceNow send the email to the author and notify them that this document is up to 3-year review, and actually send them a link to a portal where they can upload the next version. Nobody's having to manually log into Outlook and open it up and copy email addresses in and send it. You know, we know all that information in their database, and we have ServiceNow handle that administrative overhead. So a little bit of voice of the customer about what this meant for the team. This first one I wanted to highlight because I think if you come from a really large department like an IT, like an HR, where you've had tooling like ServiceNow for a long time, I think we sometimes take for granted the capabilities it gives us, and there are many departments within the health system that have never had anything like this. And for them just to be able to project their work, be able to see what's going on, understand their team's resource utilization was huge for them. I include this middle quote from their manager because it's very rare in IT for me that I've had people tell me anything I've done for them has been life-changing. And I want to challenge you a little bit. If you think ServiceNow can't be part of the patient experience, it's only a back-end system, it has no impact on what we do with patients, this bottom quote is our mission fulfilled, right? We have an educator who had time to do a customized learning experience for a patient where they could bring their family in who were up in Green Bay, far away from us in Madison, so that that patient could get the education they needed so that they could have a better outcome when they went home. And that doesn't happen if that educator is spending all day in Excel and Outlook trying to manage a process that has no definition and is just consuming all of their time. The last one I'd like to take you through is some of the work we did for COVID. I think this is really when we started to get beyond what I would call kind of cookie cutter ServiceNow apps that we're very comfortable with, into an area where we were building things that we had never built before, with capabilities we had never tried to deliver before. This first one is a risk assessment tool. And what this was built in response to was we knew we'd be getting COVID-19 vaccines. We knew they would come in small lots, certainly not enough for all 13,000 people in our phase 1A population. So we knew we were going to have to do some prioritization within that group. And we knew it was going to have to be done relatively quickly. The total build time for this was about 5 days from the time we first talked about it to the time we had people using it. The biggest challenge we had here is because of the pandemic, our system had redeployed staff across the health system to support where they best were needed and could support. And so what that meant is I couldn't just say, well, all our residents get this prioritization score for the vaccine, because we didn't necessarily, what was in their HR record for their work location and what they did wasn't necessarily true. You couldn't say someone in IT works off site, so they're low risk, because we had IT staff that had been redeployed to support clinical operations in some cases. So we needed a tool that would let our leadership teams in these different departments or department chairs bulk score their department for general risk, but then really dive down at an individual level and provide updated individual scoring where staff needed to be redeployed. And we wanted to have all this risk assessment done by the first week of December so that we could be ready for potentially the vaccine to arrive that week. It ended up being a week later. We had a little more time than we thought, but this was a case where we were able to leverage kind of inbuilt components of ServiceNow and integration to our HR data system to be able to put something together very quickly that met the need in a much more efficient manner than would have been kind of sending everybody to a SharePoint spreadsheet to overwrite each other's updates. This is just a couple screenshots of our vaccine scheduling app. So maybe demonstrating, I think, some of the power of ServiceNow as an app development solution. When we had originally built this, it was for our scheduling our flu shots for our employee health department. And we had used ServiceNow to schedule annual flu shots for all our employees. It kind of came around in late October, hey, could we use this for COVID vaccines? And we said, well, sure, why not? And so with about 2 weeks of work, we had kind of extended this application to put it out there for really scheduling our first dose COVID vaccines. And I will definitely say, you know, you guys on this call are in healthcare. Like, the moment when we had clinicians coming in for their first shots and the like relief and joy people had at finally being protected in an environment where they were at such great risk. Some of, you know, we had physicians who were not seeing their families. I mean, I never thought we could do something like that with ServiceNow. And it's a hugely gratifying part of my work that we were able to make that happen for our staff. Again, just a couple voice of the customer. This is from the leadership team we worked with our kind of vaccine initiative. Again, like the 5-day development timeline, like part of the reason we ended up getting tapped repeatedly to build solutions on ServiceNow during the pandemic is because we repeatedly had these incredibly short timelines for prototyping as leadership, and our incident command were trying to make decisions where we were able to turn out pretty functional software very quickly to meet very targeted business needs. And because of the low effort required to build that on ServiceNow, some of those prototypes never went anywhere. And that's okay, because we didn't invest, you know, 3 straight weeks building to get to a prototype. We typically invested a few hours and we're able to get the thumbs up, thumbs down, and then continue work. So a couple lessons learned, maybe things to think about if you're looking to do this kind of work in your organization with ServiceNow. Again, those service management opportunities, I can't reiterate this strongly enough. Like, you will find them in the modern health system. They are everywhere you look, and there are teams just dying for something better than having some poor person have to be the Excel macro wizard. As you look for where you might deploy ServiceNow in your organization, the approach I take with my team is that we really try to not focus directly on the problem in front of us, but really focus on the capability that needs to be delivered. And that capability pattern is really important, because as we look across the organization, we see 2 things, right? Departments share ways of working and departments share problems. And so an example of that, right? Like, if I have a facilities manager and I have a culinary services manager, those are wildly different jobs, but they have to do very similar things. They both probably have inventory management use cases. They both have service levels they have to worry about. And so as I'm building apps in ServiceNow and someone's asking me for something new, or, hey, can ServiceNow do this? I think, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Have we done that capability before? Yeah, I know we do asset management. What kind of asset management do you need to do in this particular use case? And how can I extend that asset management template we already have, snap on some of the other Lego bricks you might need from ServiceNow, and get you a solution that meets the need? So I definitely really think about that reusability of components. If you don't know much about the architecture of ServiceNow, it's very geared towards being able to rapidly extend prior things you've already built. And it works well when you can do that. Again, development standards are huge. Having standards for how you build things on ServiceNow, part of the reason we're able to go fast is because we can take those standards and templates and say, hey, I know that for this kind of service management app, this is how we build it. These are the default fields and the default states we use. This is the way we configure the UI. And when I talk to my senior developer, I don't have to put those in a giant spec document, because that is a templated kind of build that we understand on the team, that I say, hey, I need an asset management app. And behind that is a huge understanding across our development team of what that means and what needs to be in there. And it's great. If you were at Knowledge this year, ServiceNow is actually taking that approach themselves with some of the new capabilities they have for app builds, where you can really focus on capabilities you need delivered and templates to help you deliver those. The last thing I'll say on a technical front, if you think of ServiceNow as kind of an experience platform across your organization, it is a platform. So as you think about that, you want to think in the term of platform services or a platform economy. So as you add integrations to ServiceNow, that brings value for everyone that uses the platform. So as an example, that whole risk assessment tool we built was only possible because of an integration we had done with our HR data system. We had all this information about our employees. We had built that integration because that data was useful to have for our core IT workflows. But that data is useful everywhere, right? If I have a workflow on ServiceNow and I want to say, well, if this event happens, I want to be able to notify the manager of the person who submitted this. If you have that HR data in ServiceNow, anything you build on it can leverage it. That interpreter services iPad kind of workflow that we did, they wanted to be able to see where iPads were in the organization grouped by the clinical unit they were deployed on. We could do that because we were bringing our actual clinical units over in an integration to our EMR, Epic, and we were able to bring that data in. If that interpreter services group had a off-the-shelf, super cheap, small asset management tool that maybe they had gone and bought as a individual department, is very unlikely our IS department would have spent the resources to interface that to Epic for that single use case, because the cost would have been way, way outweighed the value they would have gotten for a small team. But if I'm bringing that data in on ServiceNow to use across 36 apps, that's a whole different equation. And then the last thing I'd say here, just think about email. It was a communication tool. Look how it is now. ServiceNow is there to support your employees and their mission. And that's really where we see it working. I think there's sometimes the pressure that people should be doing work in ServiceNow just to do it, just to fill out a field or track a data point. So I'd say always stay focused on your mission and what you're trying to achieve with the applications you're building and how you're helping your employees complete their work. For those of you that are in a platform owner, if you haven't read this HBR series, I think I read this and thought of nothing but our work with ServiceNow. We talk about that big B burnout all the time, but organizations have enormous amounts of little b burnout, and ServiceNow can help with both.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Guys.
I always like hearing your presentation. You know, one thing I'll say, I love your comment of thousands of mental vampires. I think, you know, you guys killed a couple of those in the process and what you're doing, and you're really kind of setting the path for where we want people to go. And, you know, one other thing too, I think if you guys noticed, it was almost a waterfall for your projects, right? So in the beginning, like you said, you had those scrapes, but now, you know, with just post, you know, late 2019 into 2020, you guys were cranking one a week out every couple of weeks, right? So that was not lost on me, that you guys, it does take a little bit to evolve into that process, but having that right methodology that David mentioned is pretty critical there. So we'll keep moving here. David, you do have a couple questions in the chat.
Oh,
yeah. There's chat and Q&A, so definitely poke on those. But thanks again, sir, and you can definitely tackle those. And you're I think where we want most people to aspire to. So, all right, so we'll transition over to Mr. Spurko here. He's going to talk around optimizing cost management. You know, John has been with us. He just moved over to a new team around as an enterprise architect. Let me actually pivot to his bio here. So always an interesting topic to hear where we're going, and just basically stepping up some of the methodology with what we're doing internally with our enterprise architect team. So John, I'm going to hand it to you if you want to give a little bit more about your background, and you can take the ball. I think you just need to pop off a mute and then you can go from there.
That helps. I had this great opening. Thanks, Drew. Today, what I'm really going to focus on is digital services. And more specifically, what I'm going to talk about is a new operating model that has been really coming up a lot. And David made some mention of that operating model. Number two, some of the benefits that we're seeing coming out of that model. And then number three, some of the resources that are available to you guys in that area if you did want to start going in that direction. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and kind of frame it out with some talk about some of the services specific to healthcare. And so if you think about our job, right, it's really to serve. And from a technology perspective, right, we're buying technology to serve, whether it's patients, it's nurses and doctors, even internal staff. Right? We're really set up to serve all these. And when you talk about the digital services required to serve, that's really where all the technology goes. Right? I don't have a complete list here around the outside, right? But as you're serving all these different consumers of these digital services, those in the inner circle here, right, are the digital services like Connect EMR as a digital service that would have certain things underneath it, right? But there's this framework of all these services that you're bringing together for all these different consumers. That's really the job of IT, right? Usually the CIO leading the way to really saying, how do we deliver the best digital services possible? And what that CIO has is a fixed budget. Usually it's about 5% of your revenue in healthcare is a technology budget, right? And it's not always under the CIO, that specific budget. Sometimes it's spread out across different departments and they have their own technology budgets. And so the big job that everybody's trying to do is really figure out, how do I best leverage that $50 million, if you're a $1 billion organization, to deliver these services? Right, so the big question that we're trying to answer with this model is, what am I paying and what am I getting, right, in each of these different areas? Now, a lot of times it's up to leadership to figure that out, because there's not a real well-developed model around, we're delivering this thing and we're paying this much and it's this good or this bad. So if you think about like enterprise architecture where I sit, a lot of times we have these big boxes that are real general, like everything for patients is up here and everything for physicians is over here. And then we have to figure out where the investment areas are, right? And that's a lot of times, if you do have an enterprise architect practice, that's what they're doing. Otherwise, that's done other ways, right? There's always prioritization going on. But really just figuring out where that money goes and then where it gets consumed, not only from a strategic investment perspective, but also from the operational side. And so if everybody buys into this concept, the big takeaway on this slide is that inevitably all of our technology budget lands on a service somewhere, whatever those services are that you're delivering, a digital service. And this is really, if you remember two things from today, everything ServiceNow does fits in one of two buckets. We're either helping you support these digital services, or we're helping you deliver these digital services, right? On the support side, it's more of a framework for what we do in a standardization part. And then the delivery part is really where we go ahead and say, what specific technology are we using for this one service or these groups of services together? And so sometimes it's people get that dichotomy between those two areas is where people get caught up a little bit with ServiceNow. Are we talking about actually being a service for a patient, or are we talking about, you know, supporting projects that are building patient services? And a lot of times we get back and forth with those. So if we take one specific service, let's break that down a little bit more and go into a little bit more detail. So for every dollar that you spend on a service, right? Figuring computers are going there, headcounts going there, there's licenses you're paying for. You really want to spend 95 cents of that dollar on specific licensing, right? The technology that you're using to deliver that service. That's where you really want to focus. And that's what you want to have that part too, so it's adjustable, right? If I have an old thing that I'm delivering here, you know, an old infrastructure or old applications, I want to be able to get rid of that part and change it out. The part you really want to standardize on, right, that makes you just better in general at service delivery is that support area. And that's the operating model I'm going to talk to you today, is around that support stripe. And really, ideally, what we'd like to get down to is taking as much of the things that are the same across all services and standardizing those. And it's a new operating model, because what it used to be is that IT would really push in the direction of centralizing as much as possible. And this was a really big thing back in the day, where CIOs came in and we're going to centralize email, we're going to centralize this, we're going to centralize all applications, we're going to take care of them. And that centralization model, it worked with some things, right? We mostly got phone systems centralized under one area, and across organizations, we can share those phone systems. We got some other things centralized, like email. Email is the one that's pretty much centralized into one area. Every department doesn't have their own email. But there's still a lot of those things in that support area where everybody in a department, as you look across your organization, they might have their own financial management, their own contract and vendor management, right? Those are things that are really good areas for improvement across that stripe, across that support stripe. Okay, so that's really where we want to get in terms of an expenditure. And that's, like I said, it's still a new operating model. Everybody's not here yet, but it's the trend that I'm seeing a lot, and I'm getting brought in a lot to have these conversations around, how does ServiceNow help us with this operating model? So really what I try to get people to is there's all these imperatives, right? Like cloud first, we want to modernize infrastructure. There's all these different things that are going on across an organization. What really we want to get it down to is these two, right? Because if you're doing security, you're doing it to support all your services, right? You're not usually doing security for one service, right? So to start thinking in these two different boxes of where we go. So what we're looking to do are two different things in those areas, right? On the digital service side, we really want to make everyone like an Amazon, like I'm trying to sell something or sell a group of things, or like an Uber, like a ride share, right? I'm trying to wrap that organizational structure around that service so that I can deliver it really well. And it's not like deliver it and forget it. The old way used to be, okay, IT got involved because we'd rack your servers and then we'd install some app on it and then have at it, right? It's up to you guys. Well, there's this concept of continuous improvement and focusing the team on that support stripe. And then really what we want to do is we want to get rid of that mundane thing, those things you do over and over, so that we can really focus on modernizing that service piece and getting the best services we can with the best technology. The outcomes we're looking for here, a lot of people, when I go into organizations and we go in and we really say, okay, what do we can help you with over the next 3 years? And that's the difference with my job versus somebody else's job that would come in. Is my little stripe in ServiceNow is to help them with their strategy. And what everybody tells me in the beginning is we feel like we're just firefighting. We're not really a data-driven organization. And so that's the real big thing, is to get those KPIs so that you can get your team really focused, laser focused in that area. And then you're going to drive down costs, right? We want to get that ratio. I don't know if that's right because I don't have metrics on that, but I'm thinking like 95/5 is a pretty good target. And then on the bottom, right, like I said before, we want to really get people to be more aggressive about the technologies that they're looking at and focus on really that delivery area, because that's where the value is going to come from, is on that delivery part. Now, ServiceNow helps, right, in 3 different areas, and there's different buckets you'll see from this. So if you think about all of our ITX lines, you probably heard ITBM, ITOM, ITSM, even our SecOps line kind of falls into that IT service, those things that we can standardize. And then on the bottom, this is where our CSM and our App Engine comes in. And so it's more of that delivery side. And what we want to really focus on, just to get us framed a little bit for the rest of this conversation, we really want to focus on that support side. Right? So the support side is where our modeling and all the things that we're doing in ServiceNow are really going to help us go forward. So that's the part I'm going to spend the rest of the conversation on. We're going to drop that delivery side now. David covered that for us really well on some of the specific delivery things that they're using ServiceNow for on the App Engine front. So I'm going to go a little bit different on that operating model on the support side. All right, so the operating model is this. Some of you may have seen this before. There's a big white paper published on it. It's in our documentation now. But what ServiceNow really focuses on for the model is 4 big domains. And really what we realized is in delivering these services and supporting the delivery of the services, rather, there is a big disconnect between these domains. Because up here you had your organizational foundations, what teams are being formed. I have a team of database support people, a team of Java developers. So it's all those groups that are helping with the services or actually consuming the services, those groups of people. And then there was this design domain, and usually this is management making decisions. Hey, we need these capabilities, so we're going to buy these applications for those capabilities. And we know those applications, we know if they're deployed properly, we can squeeze what we need, we can squeeze the value out of those. So they might do 40 or 50 things, kind of like ServiceNow. When you bought ServiceNow, it's a platform, but you can do all these different things with it. Right? So usually there's a capability or a set of capabilities that you have in mind in that design domain, and you buy something. So it's just a financial transaction. At the point you buy that something, it still doesn't have any value. So what you now have to do is you give it to IT, and IT wraps a service around it, right? Because what they're doing is they're adding value to that thing by now making it, operationalizing it, right? Saying now this is running, it's accessible. And then what you have to do is the BRMs and your project teams are saying, okay, what are we delivering? What is actually in this sell consume domain? What goes in our catalog? And this is the process for a service, for a digital service, a modern digital service today on that support chunk, right, is really this model. I don't want to go into too much detail because we have a short time today, but our common service data model, everybody gets this in ServiceNow. If you bought one thing from ServiceNow, if you have a ServiceNow login, this whole model is always there. It's not something that, oh, you have to buy this piece and add that on, or this piece and add that on. These are all base tables because this model is core to every single product in ServiceNow. And so in the design domain, right, you have your capabilities table. If you do have an EA practice, you're defining those capabilities. You're buying the applications, and then those applications are getting deployed onto technology stacks. So there's a service that IT provides to operationalize that. Now, maybe a cloud app, you might be buying a cloud app up here. So when you come down here, it might just be, I'm going to add on single sign-on. And then the app is going to be used for different things. And over time, the idea here is that somebody's going to come in and say, I have a new capability. And what you should be doing, a lot of times, this is the biggest problem with technical debt. What you should be doing is seeing, do I have apps that already provide that capability? And many times what we have in organizations is somebody's going to bring you an app and say, I'm buying this because I want that, right? And they don't really know what that inventory is. So a big part of this model and really using it to get benefit out of it is getting into that procurement pipeline and really, getting to that part to pick the apps that we're deploying these services on. Right? And there's a white paper on this. So for those of you that have known CMDB, I want to change your thinking of the CMDB. Most people get a CMDB and they spend 90% of their time or more on this bottom piece. How do I get all my servers, all my switches, all my technology in there so that I can see what services that technology is delivering? What I've been trying to do, and a lot of the focus on this new model, is shifting. How do you move that up to a business conversation, right? How do we use this model to bring business value, to really look at the total cost of ownership for delivering a service, to really look at all the work that's being done operationally for a service versus strategic investment, right? All of that is what we're really trying to bring up in that other area of the CMDB. That's where this model lives. Right? So it takes a lot of the work you've already done in the bottom if you're doing discovery or other things to build out your infrastructure. But this is what really lights it up, right? This is what starts bringing in your contract managers, your vendor managers, your financial people. That's the real beauty of this model. Now, if we look at this, people that are used to talking about CMDB, it's always very technical focused, right? Things like mean time for recovery, because I could see all the servers that are responsible for providing that. If I'm doing a change, what am I going to break? What services am I going to break, or what's going to be impacted when I have my maintenance window? Security is another thing that gets done over and over again, right? So standardizing security across this model by having actual model for the service is a big piece. Empowering organizations to reuse components, right? Reusability is a big part of this, especially when you're buying the apps up in that left-hand corner. And then the practice for top-down design, right? How do I really say, bring me an idea or express the need for a capability and let me pick the app? Don't go ahead and buy something and tell me, hey, IT team, I need some servers to run this on. That's old school, right? We don't want to do that anymore. We want to reuse what we have up top and really reduce that technical debt we have. Right? If we have experts in this app, why are we going to go buy another app that we have to train a bunch of developers in? But there's all that overhead cost is just overwhelming, and a lot of organizations are drowning in it. Now, what we really want to focus as we move into this model, and there's a big trend, a lot of organizations are looking at it now, right, is to really establish who the consumers are and who the providers are, right? To really get that consumer provider relationship, and then have written agreements between it, a more rigor around the agreements that get. And it's not just availability, there's other things that are going there as well. There's also the TCO component. If I know the servers I'm buying down here, the apps I'm licensing up here, the resources I'm using over here, that's a really sweet model for TCO, to bring it all together and put it against that service that I'm delivering back to my organization. And so these are all the new ones. There's the enabling data-driven decision-making, and I think I'll have enough time to give you a real quick peek at what that looks like in the product. But that's really what we want to aspire to, is how can we get just a few KPIs that are the same across every service I deliver, so that I can start saying, I have a measurement mechanism. And that's what drives management crazy a lot of times, is like, why do you need to spend a bunch more money on this? We're already doing pretty good. Well, how do you know that? And a lot of times people are struggling with this, at least the people I talk to, they struggle with, how do we look at a service and really assess where we are with that service at this time, right? Reducing the overall cost is a big one, because you're streamlining things and you're standardizing. So it's more, I think David mentioned too, the governance model a little bit. Right? So there's the governance model around how you bring a new service into your organization. And then the resource allocation is really a big one. We go to so many places and you're like, John, I just don't have people that can do that. And it's like, stop buying apps. You know, I'm buying so many different platforms, and every time we have a new need for a new service. And so what you have to really do is focus those people so that you can optimize what you have. And that's a big part of it. When you get the model right, and not only get it right where you're putting it in the system, but actually using it in the right way. And there's a couple resources here. A lot of times people say, I don't have any services in my database, and they're starting from scratch. Or a lot of times people are saying, hey, John, we did our services 5 years ago, and we think we're not in a really good place. So we want to revisit how we approach that. That model that I showed you in the beginning, those services that were around the outside of that football, that's one that Drew helped me put together. I think Drew did most of it, actually, where he went and pulled all those services that are common across healthcare. But there's also these standards that are available. And one of those is the APQC standard. So they go through in real detail about all the processes. But if you look at the processes, it's a really nice way to back into a service model. You know, how do I model these services and set them up from an organizational perspective? On the EA front, there's also TOGAF, and that's run by the Open Group, and that's on the right-hand side. And I'll do a little shameless plug for my own group here. I started a group it was in 2018, in the middle of 2018, and we said, let's just get a couple customers together and just talk about this service delivery. How do we get better at this? We always feel like we're not doing enough, or our incidents aren't focused in the right area, or our catalog's a little bit off. So how do we just focus and really build that muscle of delivering services better? And right now we have about 400 people in that group. And you can't see it on here, but healthcare is our number 3. So education is the big one. There's a lot of people working on the model in education, and then government, and that's a lot to do with where I was working. But healthcare is really building up. There's a lot of healthcare people that are coming in and joining our group and sharing where they're stuck, and also how they're getting through those points. So that's just 3 places you can really dig in a little more, besides the white paper that I mentioned in the beginning. I should have put that on here. But that's a 30-page paper that talks about this delivery model, and can really get you in the right spot. I'm going to take 2 more minutes, Drew, and I'll hand it back.
Sure.
So this is a quick look at one of those services. Like if we look at patient engagement, if you take that football in the beginning and you look at patient engagement, this is our service owner workspace in ServiceNow. And I put this together pretty quick, so it doesn't have all the data in there, but you can envision what we're trying to do is really make that everything focused on that, right? So the overview here is giving me a rolled up score of performance on this service, right? So we try to standardize so we have one measurement on every single service we deliver. And then underneath this, right, there's going to be different offerings. So for patient engagement, we might let we might let people come in and form a complaint case for a patient, or we might let them come in and create a bill, right? Wrapping the services around the bill pay. And then what you can do is you can drill down on these individual pieces, and you'll see we have some KPIs at each level, right? So I have the CSAT scores that are coming up, because we'll be surveying people that are using that service that we're delivering, right? And then also there's how many people are using it, and then of course, what is the rolled up cost on that service? And all those three things, they really come together on my scorecard, and it's standardized across my whole portfolio that goes up, at the patient program level. But it's the whole portfolio that really comes in. And if I look at my info tab here, you can see that my scorecard is 20% is based on an availability, 20% is based on that activity, how many people are using it. There's some on the CSAT surveys that are sending out. Right, so this is that model. Then we start bringing in the improvement initiatives. There's operational work going on here. How many people, how many outages have there been? How many critical incidents have there been? So this is getting it up to the level where the business can be looking at a service instead of it being all about IT. Like here, we just want to show them the critical incidents or the unplanned changes. We don't want to show them everything. We just want to show them enough to know that there's really bad things happening with your service right now. And then as you get into the this area, we even get in and start interacting where you can drill down on the either the consumers, people that are using that service, or even on the contract side, we can drill into specific contracts against this service or specific vendor scorecards. Right? So it really gives you that one place to go to look at that overall service, or come up at a program level and look at all of the services that are functioning under that program. Right? So this brings it up to the leadership level and really gives you that high level visibility into a bunch of those different services that are being delivered. Oh, that was a mouthful. Hopefully that was useful. I wanted to pack a lot in there real quick because I'm pretty excited about this model. It's a lot of the work that I've been doing, and I think it's a lot of what you'll see in the next stages of ServiceNow.
Yeah, awesome, John. And people were asking for links to get access to your group. So definitely post that when you have a sec. And your piece actually dovetails really nicely with David's piece too. It's almost kind of the precursor to that. And David was really the implementation of that in practice. And it's really where we want to go, is to have this prescriptive model where we can say, hey, how do we map those business services, and even having that level above where we can say your service of radiology, oncology, neurology will even drill down into those particular services and then map the performance and the resources. I mean, what John just showed is really a CFO's dream, and probably even a CEO's dream. So, and again, I think we're slowly getting there too, as you'll see, but at the same time, the tools are all there, but that is the goal, is to create some of that best practice. So thank you, sir. There are definitely some questions there. I think Ray tackled the documents themselves, but if you have any of the other things you want to post in there, feel free to post those as well. So thank you very, very much. So, all right, we are in the home stretch, transitioning here over to Mr. Josh Malacott here down with SEL Health. So I believe he's actually up in Wisconsin though, but at the same time, he's got about 16 years of experience, 10 with service management, and then 7 years within the ServiceNow ecosystem. And SEL was one of our physician onboarding customers that they launched late last year, but he's really going to be talking about this is the wrong intro here. He's really going to be talking about the the Oracle integration that they did as well too. So that's primarily going to be the context of leveraging a separate system of record from an employee record standpoint with that process. So sorry, I forgot to swap that title out, Josh. I think we changed every other one except for this one. So I'll toss it over to you, sir, and feel free to take the ball.
Thanks, Drew. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. And screen share should be coming up. Okay. Well, Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to take some time to talk to you today. My name is Josh Malakote, as Drew graciously introduced me. I'm the manager over the ServiceNow Architecture and Product Management Group at SCL. So responsible for.
Real quick, Josh, I don't think we're seeing the screen quite yet. There we go. All right, perfect. Thanks.
Is it up now?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Thanks. So want to just start quickly with, who are we and what is SCL? SCL is a healthcare company based out of Colorado. Okay. So a little bit about us. SCL is a mission-based Catholic healthcare organization. We have operating revenue around $3 billion with 8 hospitals, 140 clinics across Colorado, Montana, and Kansas. About, I would say, 14,000 actual associates, but a large portion of contracted staff. So we are in the upwards of 22,000 individuals that work in the SCL environment. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is definitely a focus on not only integrating with Oracle, but some of that contracted staff and some of the issues we were having with onboarding a new process for those contractors. So background to this story, in 2019, our ITDS team established a program wheel in support of SCL's ongoing mission to support the patient. All of these programs aimed at aligning our organization to 5 major platforms to keep our focus on excellence in delivery and ultimately that patient delivering that care. SCL selected Google, Salesforce, Epic, and Oracle and ServiceNow as our major technology platforms. With this, that meant a switch from our current ERP system, Lawson, which we actually just went live, to Oracle. So we were moving some platforms around during the establishment of this program wheel. Now, with the major platforms established and kind of the ecosystem built around the data, technology, security, and delivery of those applications within the system, as was mentioned previously, the need to integrate data and processes between these systems became imperative. If we're going to stick with 5 major platforms and really align to those whenever we're brought in with need and demand, then we need to make sure that these systems are talking and integrating together so that we can seamlessly pass data and information and ultimately support that end-to-end process. So this was the start of our journey. We're well into it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about a few of the challenges we had along the way. I want to first start off with an analogy. I'm kind of into cars. So much like a car show, we often hear about that new, fast, and shiny ServiceNow product that's transforming the industry. Well, today, I hate to break it to you, I'm not going to be speaking about a Ferrari. Rather, I'm going to be speaking about a minivan. And how I approach this is it's going to be a lot more economical, practical, and hopefully much more relatable to everyone on the call. So, the challenges that we're going to face and that I see every organization potentially needing to go through. And again, that's integrating systems together so that data flows freely. So again, not necessarily the biggest transformation, but it's providing that foundation and baseline to support all of these other initiatives that we're working inside of this, inside of SCL. So that brings me to my first challenge. SCL initiated a project to replace their aging HCM and ERP system, Lawson, with Oracle, again, one of those big 5. What this meant was it really aligned it or prompted a need for us to realign that core data throughout the systems. We were sunsetting and decommissioning some homegrown applications that acted as a data lake or single source of truth for all sorts of information. What we needed was an alignment to that single source of truth, which was going to be originating for a lot of that data within that side of our HCM ERP system. Once we did establish that system of truth, we really needed a way to deliver that core demographic data to downstream systems. And we needed that data to be kept up to date and synced automatically. So very important is, again, foundational data of it needs to be right, it needs to be from the source, and it needs to be available for us to use inside of our processes. So that was our biggest change with our ERP and HCM, was moving and having this new data structure being needed. Second challenge that we had with the Oracle project was what we were hearing from the project team there was a lack of ability to segregate access to allow SCL supervisors to submit contracted staff inside of our HCM application. And really, to break it down into simple terms, our contracted staff, this could be providers, students, vendors, volunteers, just contracted staff coming into the organization. The initiation of that process was done by those sponsors and supervisors. It wasn't directly done by our HR team. Now, our Oracle consultation partners came in and said, look, we really can't open up or segregate the access to allow those supervisors to create contracted staff only without giving them the ability to create associates as well. So the challenge that we were approached with from ServiceNow, or as a ServiceNow team, was, can you deliver an external entry point to allow supervisors to submit for those new and rehired contracted staff? So we went back and forth and took this one on as, yes, we can potentially do that for you. So getting into our core demographic data, just how we approached it was we decided to really sync a lot of that data through our HR service delivery module. The HR module natively has the structure and data tables to support users, profiles, confidential information, PII information, as well as jobs, job history, and multiple different information that is collected within that HR profile. Inside of the core base tables as well, we had a lot of the demographic data that is, again, already built out and ready to be utilized within ServiceNow. And that's business units as they interact with departments, locational syncing data, and then again, positions that feed into those HR profiles. So approach was, hey, we're going to leverage REST web services and import set functionality to really just consume that data into our system. Do twice a day syncs to ensure the data is kept up to date. We have monitoring capability on that, and again, that gives us that core demographic data. Now, I put this into 3 bullet points to make it sound really easy. It was a challenge to talk through this and determine, okay, what do we need to pull from Oracle? What is Oracle feeding to us versus other systems? What do we need to catch from Oracle and then potentially feed into other processes or other systems ourselves? So again, we had a lot of this downstream implications on how is the data structure going to flow with inside of SCL. But ultimately, we had 2 key drivers and benefits that we realized with this was this new source provides us a fit, correct organizational structure and correct user demographic data. And then again, using this outbound API REST web services, we can automatically pull that data in and sync it with ServiceNow. Now, I know this may be a little bit of an eye chart. It really is just meant to say, when we were initially kicking this meeting off to talk through demographics, we did talk through what does the architecture look like and how we can, 1, sync the data between the primary ERP HCM system and its downstream counterparts. And then 2, for that second challenge, how can we integrate ServiceNow as that front end entry point for contingent workers or contracted staff in the system? So this was the result of about a week of workshop and planning with all of the teams to figure out, okay, how are we connecting different systems? You'll see security software in here, IIQ, Epic, Google, other systems that again are flowing in. And ServiceNow is a big part of that, right? So we're at the front end initiation of those contingent workers. We're also in the demographic sync from Oracle itself. So once that associate is populated or inserted into Oracle, we're feeding that into our HR Service Delivery Enterprise module. So this was a big success for us. We were able to sync this data. Completion time of this initial kind of setup to the core data was around, I want to say 5 to 6 weeks. This was done in correlation, lockstep and foot with our Oracle project. So obviously, once we were ready to go, we had to wait for Oracle to be rolled out to the organization. That happened about 10 weeks ago. So we've been live on this new demographic data and having it flow in correctly, and it's being used. And the best part, I guess, selfishly for me is when somebody asks me about, hey, why is my department wrong, or why am I showing up at a wrong location? In the past, I'd have to explain to them, okay, put a ticket in. Somebody from the ServiceNow team will go in and update that department for you. Single source of truth now, we've worked with our service desk, and that's a that's a request to the ERP system or Oracle to update it. So I can answer, hey, we sync that data with our core system of record. If it's wrong in Oracle, it'll be wrong in our system as well. So that's where you would go and initiate that request. So making it simple for not only my team and the downstream teams, but also making it simple for the customer to know, hey, all of my data comes from Oracle, and if it's going to be right in Oracle, it's going to be right in all the other systems that are applied to it. So once we got that contracted data, or excuse me, the demographic data in place and had that flowing, we then focused our attention on this contracted staff. And I'll interchange the term contracted staff with contingent worker. We needed a way to, again, identify providers, volunteers, students, contractors, that just across the board. So SEL came up with a new definition, new term for our environment, which was a contingent staff. So how we approached kind of this ask was, we knew that we wanted to front end it through ServiceNow. And this was, really driven for that sponsor, coordinator, and supervisor visibility. We wanted to ensure that Oracle was telling us, okay, who do you want to have access to these forms? So pulling again on that demographic data, we're able to see if there's a supervisor flag in Oracle, we have it captured within inside of our HR service delivery profile. We can then make a visibility to those forms. And we wanted to ensure that there was a customer experience that was consistent with all of the other services that we were providing on the platform. So this meant using our service portal and having this same experience and having it built in with inside of our HR processes to ensure that look, feel, response, email coordination was all done, and the customers, requesters wouldn't see anything different than if they were submitting an IT ticket or an HR case for another event. We knew, again, that we had that Oracle integrated data. This was our positions and profiles. So as part of us setting up a new contingent worker, the supervisor needs to identify what is the position or job and some other key information as far as what's their start date, who's their supervisor going to be in the system, etc. So having that core data there where we knew it was accurate, we knew it was kept up to date, really then provided us to say, yes, we can offer that real-time bidirectional integration with Oracle so that when we push a user into the Oracle environment, we get an automatic 200 response back. Everything's good to go. We then can know that that account's been created in Oracle, and we'll notify the user via our system. So that bidirectional integration with Oracle was key to making this all work. We didn't want to do nightly pushes. We didn't want to have it be initially Oracle suggested packaging this up in a CSV file and sending it to them. We were able to work with them and say, hey, we want an actual real-time API where we can coordinate and have this work be done with proper responses into the system. Now, what that means is once we got it into Oracle, that kicked off all of those other downstream effects or the post downstream systems that were done post creation of that user. So once we initiated that contingent worker inside of the system and into Oracle, Oracle then, as you remember from our previous slide on that architecture of the data diagram, Oracle then started feeding that into other downstream systems. So again, really trying to automate that process so it wasn't waiting for a task for somebody to go in from our HRIS team and actually work through that. So we really wanted to focus on that real time so that we could ensure that it was promptly getting created in all those downstream systems. So real high level architecture of what was done. We split our CWR process into kind of 4 events. We had a new hire or a new contingent worker. We had a rehire of a contingent worker. So oftentimes when we work with providers or students, we'll terminate their account or end their contract. They'll come back in a year, right? Or they'll come back in the system later. So we needed to capture the ability to identify when we were rehiring a contingent versus when they were net new to the organization. We also understood that there was going to be times when we needed to update the contingent worker. So, hey, their email's wrong, or they have other things that are happening that we need to trigger that event that would then prompt them to go update that information. And then ultimately, yes, we needed to set up a termination process so that if you were ending a contracted status, or no one was working with SEL, that we ensured that the account got closed down, and then those subsequent deprovisioning activities happened in the background. So went with 4 processes. You'll see right now there's 2 of them that are being executed inside of ServiceNow. That's the new contingent worker and the rehire of the contingent worker. We also decided that some of those processes are going to be done directly and transactionally inside of Oracle. So hey, if you need a new person, you're going to go to ServiceNow. Otherwise, the ERP system gives you that system record. And we're looking at expanding out to open this up where we'll have additional API capability to offer these other 2 services within ServiceNow, probably within the next 6 months to a year. So right now, we focused on the 2 capabilities that Oracle could not complete inside of their system. And the other 2 will be ancillary ones that we'll expose in ServiceNow, again, just from that customer experience. So want to ensure that one place to go, and that's where we're at with our roadmap. So, all right, moving on. We have just a brief example of what that contingent worker form looks like. So again, we're highlighting, this is meant for contractors, contracted providing staff, travelers, students, volunteers, vendors. Again, same look and feel of a standard catalog request item that you would put into the system. What this really highlighted on was once we started having them fill out that information, 1, we're capturing all the details so that we can feed this via the API into Oracle and have it be populating all the correct fields. Now, some of these things like affiliation, business unit, user type, and all of that, some of those are only available in Oracle. And again, that goes back to the data structure that we're building in the system. So affiliation would be the company or the vendor that they work for. Business unit would be the business unit that they're assigned there. From there, we also were able to use that organizational hierarchy to really make it easier for them to pick a position. So thousands of positions, thousands of jobs within SEL. It's very hard for me to just provide you with a list of, hey, here's all of the positions, 20,000 of them. Guess which one you think that vendor or that provider needs to go into. We took again, a hierarchical approach to this. So, hey, what business unit are they going to be working for? What department potentially are they in? And then we're going to expose only the positions that relate to that hierarchy. So making it easier for the customer to choose the correct position and location, and then have that feed into from there. We also have a little bit of error deflection in this. So what that means is sometimes people forget that a person might have worked for the company previously. So they go to the new hire form and they start typing a name in. Well, we wanted to have the ability to catch, hey, we found somebody in our user table that has the same name, same email, maybe same last 4 digits of their social or date of birth, right? So again, looking on that key core information that we have, so that if they do put a name in there of somebody who may have worked here before and we already have their account in our ERP system, we're going to flag that and say, hey, we found so-and-so user. Is that who you're looking for? And have that be able to deflect, because that just, again, keeps the system running smoothly and also makes their job easier where they don't have to necessarily fill that user information out again. They just need to potentially just go reactivate that account, which will pre-fill in all the information from that user. Once we're done, so again, we have the user fill out the form, verify that that user doesn't exist within our tables. We'll submit that request, and then that's where we really utilize the workflow portion of the request item. So from in there, we're going to initiate an API push out to Oracle to essentially push that information into the system. Now, Oracle is going to return back, usually within a few seconds, yep, I got the information, it's a success, or it might return a hey, this didn't work, or I found a user already, or some error code that's with that. Now, we have built into the workflow where we're waiting for that response. And if it's success, then we will go ahead and update the ticket, close it, and notify the requester that that record's been completed, that their user is good to go. We'll also include some information as far as here's your next steps and what you need to do to potentially request access, and work through those additional things as part of the onboarding process. Now, if we get an error, that actually right now will manually deflect a task to a team to go troubleshoot what was that error. So again, we keep the request item open in a pending state while that error is being processed. We also allow that catalog task that is responsible for troubleshooting the error, they can refire that submission once they've made changes to the key information that was part of the original submission. So maybe they misspelled the name and we found that there was another person with that misspelling. Well, we can correct the name, refire the submission, and then wait for that response back. Once that response comes back success, we can then close that catalog task. It will then complete the workflow process. We have other times where maybe we look at that REST response and say, oh, this person already exists. We need to notify the requester that person exists already. They just need to reactivate the account. We'll move that to an ignore status. That will then trigger another portion of the workflow to complete the request without processing that. So again, really tying into, we get a lot of requests being processed for contracted staff. I mentioned we have some 6,000 to 8,000 contracted staff or contingent workers in our environment at any given time. So lots of students coming on. The need for this automated error deflection was very important for us to ensure that the onboarding events were timely and processed in the correct time. So with this contingent worker, we've been live for about 10 weeks. We've seen around 1,000 requests, 1,000 plus requests completed in those 10 weeks. Now, the big revelation there was 20 requesters completed about 2/3 of all of those requests. So even though HR wasn't responsible for onboarding those contingent workers, there were identified supervisors and sponsors that were processing all of these. What we also found was the median completion time for these contingent worker requests was around 13 seconds. And 95% of those were done under 2 minutes. So, again, we were seeing a very quick response where once that was submitted, that real-time bidirectional communication between Oracle and ServiceNow allowed us to complete the request and then notify the customer that it was completed. 91% of those submissions over the 10 weeks required no manual intervention. So 91% automatic success rate without requiring us to manually adjust anything within that. Now, of those 9% where we did have issues, a lot of them were edge cases that we worked to resolve. We typically found it could be a duplicate user, and we needed to adjust our checking to verify that those requests were coming in and being flagged correctly, or notifying the customer that, hey, we did indeed find someone. This all led to improved CSAT scores on our CWR requests as well. So we run NPS here across all of our service lines, specifically against different services, and we did see improved CSAT scores for our contingent worker request process. So looking at the metrics, definitely saw an increase in a benefit, and hey, we are seeing the customers are liking the service. So kind of next steps for where we're looking to go with these two processes is, from a contractor or contingent process, really looking to automate that error deflection. So one of the things is, hey, instead of us potentially having to work through a duplicate that has been rejected by Oracle, can we make it easier or more visible for the requester to see that there is a duplicate? So this is very similar to things like this, where, hey, we're gonna do a pop-up that says, our records indicate that the person's already there, and instead of today where we're pointing them to another form where they have to go fill out, we're actually giving them the ability to click a button and have that automatically move them into the rehire process versus the new hire process. So again, looking at some more automated error deflection to help catch that 9% of those requests that are having to be manually looked at or manually processed. Other than that, we're looking at adding on to those additional service offerings. So one of the things that often comes up is, hey, I have a new position that isn't in Oracle. How do I request that? Well, No easy way to request that in Oracle today other than putting a case ticket into our HRIS team. So building out these additional processes to support this, again, core onboarding for these contingents, as well as vendors too. So, hey, I have a new vendor. It's not on the list. What do I select? Well, we want to be able to spill them off into an additional request form where they can, again, initiate that vendor creation, and then we'll, again, use this API to build out that vendor and initiate that inside of Oracle. From a data perspective inside of Oracle, our next phase is actually integrating Oracle supply chain and financial data. So right now we're, again, on the user demographic data, the core business unit structure. We are very quickly, or we have gone live with our IT business management and facilities management processes. We're looking at bringing in the supply chain side of it so that we can track, and financial data to track actuals against those demands and projects that are being done inside of the system. So next big push there would be to target the financial and supply chain side of Oracle data to sync that in as a single source of truth. And then finally, we are looking at migration of the processes into Flow Designer. So we're currently using the request item and we want to leverage some of the unique additional functionality that Flow Designer brings with the processing of those API requests into Oracle, again, to make it a little bit easier to maintain. So with that, that's my highlight today. Again, hopefully you enjoyed it, and it was a little bit more relatable to potential challenges that we're seeing. But with that, I'd open it up to any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. There's a comment there in the chat too, and you know, I think I was having flashbacks to my hospital days when we went through an EMR migration and had 3,000 different roles and users and menus for 7,000 employees, and so, you know, it's almost like you had a good opportunity with the migration from Lawson over to Oracle, but you know, I'm sure that folks could look at this and it's almost like moving, right? It's a good opportunity to kind of clean up the process as you go through that as well too. I guess one question I'd asked is, you know, you touched a little bit on the letting the system, Oracle be that system of record for the employee. Like, how long did it take you guys? I know you said 4 or 5 months to map out the process, but how long did it take you even just to get to the point where you knew what data you wanted to live and where? Was that part of that 4 or 5 months, or was that even precursor? Because that almost seems like the hardest part to me, right?
It was. So when we were doing those initial workshops, there were a lot of things in play. We initially first thought that we weren't going to even house contracted staff in Oracle because there was an additional charge for each one of those headcounts inside of that system. So we first potentially were exploring using HR as the system of record for our contracted staff, and then having ServiceNow flow downstream. We could have done it, but thankfully, again, with the discussion and the architectural review that we decided, no, we really need to keep all of our users in the system of record. It was worth the additional licensing that they were going to allocate for that. Overall, we spent about 3 weeks with the initial discovery, a week for the workshop, and then ultimately getting those designs aligned to execute the work. Now, the ERP project was I want to say 16-month project. Again, if anybody's done an ERP project for a major change, you know it's not a light or easy to do initiative. So we were a bolt on to that to make sure that, hey, this one process or these key areas we're going to help with. IIQ was another one. So because of the ERP system change, we had to bring in SailPoint to manage our role-based access. So as we were doing the ERP system, we also, and during that review, had to plan out how we were going to work and integrate with these other systems as well. So about 3 weeks of workshop and planning, and then numerous stakeholder and alignment meetings to make sure that we were going on the right path.
Great. Yeah, and Sunil mentioned it there in chat, and I got a couple other notes. There's a lot of people going through that migration right now, and it was a great example of wrapping around that support. And I might ping you offline about the supply chain piece. I'd love to hear what you're doing there too, just because that actually came up yesterday as well too. So thank you so much for the time. And we're in the home stretch here. So so just a couple more quick things before we close up, just some housekeeping items. So definitely go back and review our, this will all be sent out to you, all the presentations today, as well as a survey that we just are outlining to make sure that we're meeting the needs, and also for the next session we have that any ideas that you may have as well too. So, and in parallel, again, there's a series of knowledge sessions out there that are on demand. Some of the presenters today might actually be on those sessions, so definitely go check those out. We want that content to live as you move forward as well too. And then we don't want the conversation to end today as well too. So the presenters will also be available to respond in our community. So there's a lot of good content there as well too, as well as the interaction. And again, we will send out the content as a part of that as well too. And then the other thing too is getting back to normal. We are going to be at HIMSS in August in Vegas, which sounds like a delightful temperature, but there will be quite a few people there. But you know, we are going to expand on the use cases that we touched on in the beginning with Vishaka, as well as having an innovation experience too. There are a couple of sessions we'll have there as well too, so definitely check those out and reach out as you go through the process. So hopefully today was helpful for everyone. Again, reach out to Chris O'Reilly or myself, and definitely a huge thanks to all of our panelists and presenters. I always learn something and look forward to all these when you guys present. So hugely helpful, and this doesn't happen without you. So definitely a huge thanks to you guys. And so with that, we will close up shop, and thank you so much.